So they finally invited me to go with them to summer camp, and I went, and it was a very, very amazing, awesome, and powerful experience. The reason why, for me, because I mentioned to you somewhat of my home environment, nothing was hidden from me at home. So all the crime and everything that was going on, it was never tucked away from me because I was a kid and I was exposed to it head on. So this is the first time I'm able to be in an environment where I just get to be a kid. I just get to hang out. I just get to have fun. And they had a very, very powerful speaker there over the duration of camp, who at the end of his speeches would leave us with very short but very powerful questions. After he gives us the questions, we go back into our cabin, and then we all discuss them. So it was these questions themselves that really started getting me to think that perhaps and maybe I can live a different life than the one that I'm living. So after this amazing, powerful camp experience, I ended up converted to Christianity, and it was a good thing for me at that time in my life, because when I came back, it gave me the encouragement that I needed to stop hanging around a lot of the friends that I was around. And the other thing that was really a bracha from Hashem, was that same beginning right at the end of that summer, I got mail from the Seattle School District allowing me to go back into regular public schools. So I'm sitting there now and I have this letter and I'm reading it and I'm so excited now I get to go back to school. I probably shouldn't have been so excited because I didn't have that many options of schools that I was going to end up going to. The school I ended up going to was like dead last in all the test scores in education in the whole entire city. But I ended up going to this school. Now, a lot of the people that I grew up with before were already in the school. So I said to myself, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to start over. I'm going to be so unassuming. I'm going to be a quiet kid. No more class clown. No more getting kicked out of class. Because in my middle school years, I was in the principal's office more than the principal, for sure. So I said, this time for sure, I'm going to be a quiet kid. No more issues. Now, I convinced not only myself, but everybody else for about 4 months. After 4 months, they did a big assembly where they decided to do a whole host of competitions. They split us up by class from 9th to 10th, 11th to 12th grade, and we decided to do, competitions like dodgeball, for instance, certain different games like that, but sort of like a color war a little bit. And it's probably my wife. And as you can imagine, because we were the underclassmen, we were the youngest, we lost in every single competition. They beat us in everything. But the last competition that they decided to do was a rap battle. Oh.
Well, we came here. You're known for
that. For anybody on the faculty that doesn't know what a rap battle is, I'm going to refer you to your local Marble Day School student to know what it is. Essentially, two guys get up, and who can say the best Lashon Hara in a rhyme is the next person. Essentially a rap battle. It's not such a Yiddish sport. It's not a Jewish sport. Anyway, so they select everybody from the other 3 classes, and finally they come around to the 9th grade. And I'm thinking to myself that if I go out there, for sure, I'm going to blow my cover. The quiet kid thing is over. So I'm sitting there, and I held out as long as I could until all of my friends who were pushing me and saying, you have to go out. I decided myself that I'm going to go up, and I ended up taking the microphone, and I think each person maybe had about a minute long or whatever. So they did the normal Lashon Hara thing. And back then I was very, very exceptional at freestyling. So instead of making or going back at them with a regular diss, what I decided to do was I told every single person in the audience to hold up whatever they had in their hand, their pocket or whatever, and I went around the whole entire auditorium and I made it up all off the top of my head. After that, the whole entire place erupted. I won it. And you can forget about being the quiet kid. They had a rap battle now every single week, right? So I was very, very distracted with this. Now I went into my middle school years, as I said, and my high school years thinking the quiet kid thing, and now that it's been disrupted, it went from being a thing of where I felt as if this was from a thing of thinking that, I was going to be able to fool everybody else to a thing of where I became totally wrapped up and distracted into these rap battles. So much so that football, everything else, so what happened was, in between football and the rap battling and everything else, that experience, that powerful experience I had at that camp, that me and God experience that I had, that sort of started to wane. Everything sort of went down. So I remember by my 10th grade year, and having every distraction that you could possibly think of, I remember coming in one lunch period. Nothing could have made me feel the way that I felt except for some powerful experience with God. I remember walking in, and I was coming down the main hallway, and I came to a certain part of the hallway, and all of a sudden it was like everything in the world stopped. And I was looking around, and all of my friends, people that I grew up with and that I knew very well, and I felt so out of place. And I heard something inside of me screaming, "You don't belong here, you don't belong here." And I can't figure out what it is. What I was hearing inside of me, it wasn't audible, but it was some very, very strong feeling. And I started to feel as if I knew something that nobody else around me knew, but I didn't know what it was. However, I would say I ate a chicken nugget and the whole thing stopped. And after some, probably because it wasn't kosher. Anyway, but I ended up after this thinking that, you know what? I feel as if God, Hashem, at this point, I didn't know him as Hashem, I knew God. I said, I think he's trying to tell me something. I had no idea. So I ended up going back to the teen center that I was involved in, and I got involved in every single leadership group, every single Bible study program. They gave me smicha, I became a junior missionary. I got very, very involved in every single thing that was flying over here at this place. As time went on, the music kept going, and it happened, I think, maybe by this time, my 11th grade year, right in between my 10th and my 11th grade year. Hashem gave me the biggest gift that he could give anybody. I ended up meeting my wife, both Hashem. Me and my wife are high school sweethearts. We've been together since we were 16 years old. I don't recommend everybody starting shidduchim in high school, but that's the way Hashem decided for me. So I ended up meeting my wife, who was a powerful, very good influence in my life at that time, because she was way less exposed to the things that I had been exposed to for my lifetime. So going into my 11th grade year, a demo of mine made it to the desk of an A&R from a very big record label. This A&R was a talent scout, and he was obviously looking for new talent, so I started getting calls from this person. And the biggest thing in hip-hop at the time was a guy by the name of 50 Cent, Hashem Yerachem. You should know who he is. We call him Chetzi Shekel in Israel, by the way, you should know. To reduce deflation, Chetzi Shekel. So what happened was, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyeh b'yoro. Nation Rama. No bracha. Anyway, so what happens at that point is that the industry at that point is really looking for gangster rap. Only thing was, that's not the type of music that I was making. That's not what they had. That's not what I was looking to make. However, after them offering me a lot of money and incentives in order to make that type of music, I caved in, gave up the moral side of it, and I started producing songs that were very much so in that vein. Now, in the beginning of that, I thought to myself that I wasn't going to actually change who I was or change my character. I would just change the music, and eventually, I'd show everybody that really, no, I'm just really a good guy. I'm just making these songs. And what I noticed was that slowly, everything around me started to change. My environment, the friends that I was around were the same crew that I was hanging around before. And now my inner circle has changed. And I started to even feel within myself that I was very confused about who I was. Very, very confused. When I was around my girlfriend at that point was my wife to be, I was one guy. When I was around my guys, I was a completely different guy. So I found myself going in between these two different lives, trying to figure out who I really was. Unfortunately, in the midst of all this, tragically, my mother passed away. I was 19, she was 37 when she passed away. And it was a deep, very, I would say, earth-shattering pain that I felt inside of me. That would be the first thing that I felt like at that point softened my heart. It softened my heart to feel and to be able to, and to be privy to what was going to be later on, Ratzon Hashem, the thing that was going to help me to change my life. So the next year would happen, and after putting out my first release, even after not taking the deal, we did everything independent. Unfortunately, there was another rapper who decided that he would put out a diss track on me. And I remember I was sitting in the studio listening to it, and obviously it hurt my pride as it would. And I decided that I would make a song back. But then a friend of mine walked into the room and he said, you know, if we just go beat the guy up, he won't make any more songs. So we went with his plan. And we ended up, and so we ended up going to find him. We went into this big fight, this brawl outside of this nightclub. All of a sudden the police come and we all leave. So I made up with my friends, we would be texting that we would meet at a particular location downtown that we all used to meet at. And we ended up meeting, and then when I got there, another friend called my phone. And that friend called me and he said that the police were looking for you. And I'm saying to myself, why would the police be looking for me? He says, well, the word was that you had a gun and you were shooting at some nightclub. It was a complete fabrication of the story. And I got very, very scared. So I started to leave, and I noticed that there was a lot of commotion going on with the police at the end of the block. So what happened was, I started walking to see what was going on at the end with all the commotion with the police, and it turned out they had one of my very close friends in custody. And it turned out that after I had left, he went up to go and try to kill the other guy. Unfortunately, he was a horrible shot and shot everything except for the guy. So he ends up in custody. But now I'm faced with a major dilemma. The dilemma that I had was now these other guys, these other rappers and all of their crew, they thought that I sent somebody to go and take their life. So now they're saying, if they don't come and take my life, then I'm going to take theirs. So obviously I was on the other end of that. That if I don't go and take their life, then they're going to come and take mine. I was in a kill or be killed situation. That's the scariest moment that I had in my life. That all of this from pretending to make a certain type of music, to have a certain type of persona, that I found myself in a situation that could really end my life or put me in a situation where I could be in prison for the rest of my life. So I remember going back to my living room and I was walking back and forth, I was pacing, and I started praying. Praying. And thank God that after some time, my phone rings and it was this other rapper. The reason why I say, for me still to this day, that was a miracle, because where I came from, nobody will ever call you to find out if it's true if you're trying to kill them or not. It's just not a question that somebody's going to call. Maybe I should be prepared. It's just not a question that you're going to get. And even furthermore, over that next year, unfortunately, I lost so many friends due to gang violence. It was a crazy and horrific amount of friends. My own sister, who was 13, thank God she survived, but she was shot the next year. It was a very, very scary time for what was going on in my neighborhood. So the fact that he called me still to this day, I thank God, because it was the biggest miracle. So we talk on the phone, we squash everything as men, we hang up, and I realized for myself, I can't go back. There's no way in the world, because no matter how much that a person wants to portray something or put something out, the real you eventually will come out when you're faced with nobody else but you. So instead, I decided to stay home, and I prayed, and I walked back and forth, and all of a sudden I had this itch to pick back up the Bible, as I knew it before. And so I picked back up the Bible. For the first time, there's nobody around me. There's no grandfather, there's no ministry group, there's nobody. And I'm sitting there and I'm faced with some very, very serious dilemmas. Some of the dilemmas I had were that a lot of these different pasukim and scriptures that I had knew very well were not referencing a relationship between God and the church, but rather referencing a relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people and Klal Yisrael. And I'm reading this again, I'm starting all over, And I'm saying to myself, how did I miss this? How did I not understand this? So as it would be, I started doing a lot of research, and I went on Google. I don't know if anybody else has ever tried this, but almost anything on Google that you type in as Jewish, Chabad.org comes up. Does that happen for anybody else? Yeah, like Chabad's the first thing. You don't have to do anything. I could put time, and it's going to give me Shabbos times on Chabad.org. I just put time in Google. You'll put Elvis, and there's going to be an article on Chabad about Elvis. So whatever you do, it's going to pop up. So I ended up going on Chabad.org and different websites. And if it's not Chabad.org, the next few websites are going to be Messianic congregations. So whatever, you end up on one or the other. So I ended up on both. And the first place I started going to was this congregation that was like a Jews for Jesus congregation. I started going there. And I was there for maybe about 2 years. I would say halfway through the second year, the more and more I started learning, trying to even just catch up with what was going on here, the more and more I started going on Chabad.org, the more and more I had an attraction towards Judaism. So I started going to a Chabad on the east side, which is in the Bellevue area, maybe 30 minutes outside of Seattle. And I started going there, and I found myself again in another place of conflict. What do? I don't know. I have no idea what I do. So I remember sitting at home. And now there was no more music, no more nothing else going on in my life at this time. I just had time, just time. And I started, we'll get to questions afterwards. We'll leave time for questions. And I started learning the 3 different religions every single day for 8 hours. I had a Quran, a few different versions of the Christian Bible. I had a Tanakh, a JPS Tanakh, and I was sitting every single day for 8 hours going between all the different texts. After that, I started fasting. I was going on 3 days, no food, and I was going out crying to God till my eyes were bloodshot red. I was crying every single day, just looking for the truth, trying to find answers. One of the most beautiful things that I came across was a very, very, very interesting idea. A lot of this was developed from my own learning because I was sitting many hours studying just Navi, learning the Nevi'im and the prophets. For the first time ever, I learned Jewish history. I grew up, I had Jewish neighbors. I didn't know anything about Jewish history. I never heard of the Holocaust a day in my life until I'm sitting here learning as an adult. So I came to an interesting conclusion. The conclusion sounds very crazy, but if you understand what I'm saying, then you'll see how uncrazy it sounds. I came to an interesting conclusion that if there's no Jewish people, then there can't be a God. So by default, if there's Jewish people, there has to be a God. The reason why is because if you look at every single place that it talks about the Ati, the future of God and humanity, there you find the Jewish people. At the end, God predicts that there has to be a Jewish people. There has to be a Jewish state, and please God, soon a Jewish king. This is all wired throughout eschatology, which is the study of the end times. So I was seeing this, and I'm thinking to myself that no way in the world, everybody believes it, by the way. Islamic hadiths talk about at the end of the time there has to be Jews, right? Also, even in the Christian scriptures, also too, they believe that the relationship between God and the Jewish people is to the end. So there has to be something very funny about the fact that there's a God in this world who's saying all of these different things, and the fact that the Jewish people were preserved throughout time when you shouldn't have. Technically, if you look at Jewish history, we probably had, I would say, from where I come from, we call it beef. We've had beef with every single tyrant you don't want to have a beef with, right? We've had problems with them. And still yet, these Jewish people. For me, that was the ultimate proof to me that there was a Hashem, that there was a God in the world. So this was groundbreaking for me, and many different other things as I was going through. And I remember sitting with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and we decided to embark on this journey together. We first got married, and then Baruch Hashem, 10 years ago, me, my wife, her sister, and my best friend from kindergarten, we all converted to Judaism together. And then only 2.5 years after that, we all made Aliyah and moved to Eretz Yisrael together, Baruch Hashem. So, in the beginning, it's okay to clap now. It's okay. I want to leave it open for questions, but I'm not responsible enough to be able to choose who's who. So we're going to have Rabbi here help me. Harav Hagon Shlita to help me out. The question, no. So here, what we'll do is, we'll do a song of my choice afterwards, but we're going to do it a cappella because we don't have music. So no more can you sing this song. That's the only question you can't ask. Any other questions?
How old were you when you started getting into trouble? How old were you when you started getting into trouble?
How old was I when I said? Depends on which trouble. Because the trouble with my parents I got into very early. Which trouble? You mean like law, legal stuff?
Yeah.
I was 13. I was 13. The first time I was ever arrested, I was 13. Good question. So, my mother and my biological father split when I was 2 years old. So I was raised from that point on by a stepfather and my mother, but I also maintained a good relationship with my biological father at the same time. Now, my biological father went from one who obviously lived a life of crime to one who he changed his life drastically. So today he's a professor and theologian, he's a pastor, and he runs several addiction programs and different things like that. So he changed his life. So he actually did become religious. But in terms of my household, nobody was religious at all. So they didn't really care so much about what I was doing in religion. They just thought it was, oh, it's a phase, whatever, it'll pass and whatever, and I'll come back to reality. So it didn't really have, it wasn't until Judaism that everybody thought I was crazy and joined the cult and everything else. As they said, and I think that's by and large because it separated us. So for my family, I didn't see my family and wasn't involved with them for maybe 6 or 7 years after I started studying Judaism. It was a time for me that I realized in order for me to be the person that I wanted to be, I couldn't have the influence of everybody that was around me, so I separated myself from me. Very good question. So he asked, I should probably repeat the question for everybody in the back, whether anything that ever, as I was converted to Judaism, that made me second think or think otherwise. The truth is that because, as I'm able to, I just told you guys my story, for a person who grows up with Judaism, you grow up from whatever Russian or language you want to use. For you, generally, you have different basics for a person who's a Tzedek, right? A person who comes from outside. So usually, if you grow up Jewish, then your basics are Shabbos, tzitzis, davening, kosher, different things like that. So you have to understand there was a whole world of time before I even knew any of that ever even existed. So my basics was closeness to Hashem. So because of that, all I had was this relationship I had with Hashem. And so whatever new things that I was finding out about was built upon this very fiery and passionate love that I had for Hashem. So I never at any point, everything was never a you have to, it was you get to, right? And so because I had this relationship with Hashem, everything new was you get to. So you get to keep Shabbos, you get to, and that was what it was because I found out something, because I was already in love with Hashem, so the more and more new things that I found out about it, I was only able to add it on to this love that I had. So for me, I can't say that there was any point ever. There was maybe one time, I remember the first Yom Kippur that I had, and it wasn't the fasting. I had fasted many times, like I said before that. The problem that I had, you know how you have this little incline? I was standing like tilted on the hill, and my feet were killing me. And I remember, I don't know if it was already by Naila, I think it was by Naila, and I asked myself, I said, are you willing to stand this long every year, Nissim? What are you doing? So I found out, I talked to a guy, and Shul told him my feet were hurting, and he said, Val, you were doing it wrong. You were stand on the incline. Now you got to stand on the flat part of the shul, and you're good. So after that, I was good. But that's probably the only time I ever thought about it. Anything else, I was good with. Alan. That's a good question. That's a very good question. He said, if so many bad things were happening inside your neighborhood, why didn't you just move out of the neighborhood? First off, is that sometimes bad things are happening to us in life, and it takes us some time to realize that they're bad, right? So certain things that are going on in our life sometimes that could be causing us anguish, and we don't realize that this is really something that's bad for us until we're able to have a period of time where we're able to sort of step out of our environment and look at it and say, wow, this is really bad. So I think by the time that I was able to really realize that it was bad, because even through all my different changes, even earlier when I came back from camp as a kid or whatever, I still hadn't really realized that it was the environment itself that was bad. I just thought I was bad, right? That I was doing things that were bad. That was my first level of awareness that, I can change my life. Now, it wasn't until I got older, and, obviously I think it was by the time I started learning about Judaism and Yiddishkeit and how important community is, right, that I started to realize that, hold on, the environment itself is bad. I should move away. And so by the time I was able to realize that the environment was bad, that's when I was able to move on.